Good morning. It is great to be a shark, isn't it? And to the future sharks, good morning and welcome. On behalf of the H. Wayne Huizenga School of Business and Entrepreneurship, the faculty, staff, and students, and the entire NSU family, I would like to welcome you to what will be one of the most exciting and informative hour that you can spend in your life. And before we begin, I'd like to recognize a few distinguished guests this morning. And I'll start with Mr. Armando Layton. He's a member of the 2013 Hall of Fame class. Armando. Mr. Alan Levan. I'd also like to recognize my boss and provost of NSU, Mr. Ralph Rogers. Dr. Ralph Rogers, Provost Rogers. I'd also like to recognize, and this young man needs no introduction, he's our founding president and president emeritus, Dr. Abraham Fischler. We also have with us a member of the Rick Case Automotive family, Ryan Case, please. And a representative from Guy Harvey Foundation, Antonio Fins. Dr. Fins. And also understand that we have some students here from Lauderdale Lakes. Yes. Lauderdale Lakes Middle School, please stand. Yeah. And we have a room full of sharks. Welcome this morning. You are in for a treat, students. You are in for an absolute treat. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Medina a while ago, and from the brief time that I spent with him, I got to know him and his entrepreneurial experiences, and he's going to share those with you so that you may know a little bit more about him. We'd like to play a video.
Medina grew up a middle-class child in the Cuban countryside of Matanzas, near the sea. Miami was a culture shock. But Manny Medina grew up a middle-class child in the Cuban countryside of Matanzas, near the sea. Miami was a culture shock, but Manny's parents worked hard to provide.
I was very, very influenced by my parents for us to leave everything we had and for her to work as a hotel maid and for my dad to drive a cab 16 hours a day. So that really inspired me that I really wanted to succeed from an early stage. So I decided to become a CPA because I thought early on it would be something that would give me credibility. I always say the best two decisions I ever made in my life was once to become a CPA, go to work for Pricewaterhouse, and the other one was to quit Pricewaterhouse, and that's how it started.
He was a deal maker, riding the wave of the late 70s.
Miami was going through one of these big booms. There was huge amounts of money, and that's how I got introduced to real estate, which then grew into development, began building a few houses, and then grew into building buildings and building shopping centers, and and doing more and more and more. Got a very big break with somebody who will be eternally grateful for, George Wackenhut. Was able to build their headquarters. One of my partners was a Lebanese gentleman that lived in London. At that point, Kuwait had been invaded. And he said, I've been doing business in Kuwait for 40 years, and I know everybody there, and you know the US, and you know building, so why don't you come and help me rebuild Kuwait? It was an incredible experience. The fires were burning, and literally right after the liberations, I was working 18 hours a day, bringing in people from all over the world to build up a team. And so they spent a lot of money, billions of dollars, reinforcing the defenses of the bases in Saudi Arabia. So I got a lot of those contracts, built up quite a business. And then by the 93 or 94, I think, I sold that business and came back to the States.
Though Manny got back into real estate, he envisioned a new path for himself.
I also became totally fascinated with the internet in the mid-90s. And that's how I really started my second phase of my career, which is technology, right? Not having a technology background, I began by doing what I knew how to do best, which is building the buildings where the internet sits, or the telcos sit, and that's how I started. Getting into know the internet business.
That internet business was none other than Terramark Worldwide, a publicly traded leading global provider of managed IT infrastructure services for Fortune 500 enterprises and federal government agencies. He stewarded Terramark through difficult financial environments in 2000, 2008, and then in 2011. Though many never wanted to sell, Verizon upped their asking price to an enterprise value of $2 billion.
So what I do now is two things. There's one part of it is business, another part of it is giving back. On my day job, I have a significant number of my former team members, and we have a partnership that I lead. We invest in early growth technology companies that we can help not only with capital, but we can help in executing. As exciting as that internet revolution was, what is happening now from a dollar point of view is much bigger. This is the industrial revolution all over again. Everything that you see in this transformation from hardware to software based, people call it the cloud, it's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. Every major enterprise, university, government agency has to transform the way that they manage their information technology.
Outstanding. All of you have seen Mr. Medina's brief bio, and I hope that you picked up a copy. And from reading his brief bio, a few words jumped out from the page at me and inspired me. And these words are, Mr. Medina founded, Mr. Medina led, and Mr. Medina innovated. He founded Terramark and led the company from its beginning into a highly successful enterprise. And this takes what I call entrepreneurial grit. He has a passion for excellence and a capacity to persevere and to overcome what may be viewed by others as insurmountable obstacles. Mr. Medina led, and for the NSU students here, all of our students have the opportunity to learn how to be leaders so that they may become future Manny Medinas. Mr. Medina is an innovator. And innovation is one of NSU's 8 core values. Innovators are never satisfied with the present state. Innovators create their own futures. Founder, leader, innovator, and Hall of Fame member, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Manny Medina.
Well, after that video and Dr. Jones' words, I think it's all downhill from here. So if you haven't had breakfast, now is a good time. I am humbled to be here today. It is an unbelievable privilege for me to be able to have this opportunity, particularly following the shoes of my good friend Alan, Armando, and of course Dr. Fischler, Provost Rogers, and so many other friends. My good friend Joe Pineda, who served as my private driver today in here, so I appreciate that. And I was very delighted to see Robin Blackwell, who's a dear friend and a very important part of the history of my life. You saw a little bit, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about it in my remarks today. So what I thought I'd do today, and I'm particularly happy that there's a lot of young folks here, because most of my remarks today are really meant for you, right? For all of you folks down there, don't be too busy multitasking with your stuff, as I'm already seeing, because it always happens with them. But anyways, because at the end of the day, it's really more addressed to you. I'm not here because of pride or ego. I'm here because I believe I have a duty. I've been very fortunate, really unbelievably lucky to just, if I can touch any of you and help you in any kind of way as you guide your lives, is something that I believe I have to do. It's not a matter of choice, right? So forgive me if I sound presumptuous as I tell you a little bit of the story of my life. I'll start out by telling you just a little bit more brief of my background, and then jump into what I've spent a lot of time thinking about as my life has gone by, and on things that may be able to be helpful to you, that have been helpful to me, and that I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, so I want to share that with you. So as you saw in the video, obviously, and as you can tell by my accent, notwithstanding the fact that it's a lot easier to do business in Miami with a Spanish accent, this is not a fake accent, this is a real accent, so obviously you will see that I was born in Cuba. My parents put my sister and I on a boat in 1965. We landed in Miami. Miami was a very unbelievably tumultuous time in 1965. Believe it or not, everybody thinks it was a little piece, a town, and tourists, etc. That is all true, but it was also a time of turmoil in Miami. My dad drove a cab 16 hours a day. My mother had 2 jobs, and of course we lived in Liberty City. I went to Miami Edison, and here's what happened. I didn't speak English. The Cubans were beginning to add up. The African Americans were beginning to get mad. The Puerto Ricans were really mad, and the rednecks say, "What the hell are all these people doing here?" Right? So this is a scenario where a 13-year-old rebellious kid jumped into, right? Because by nature, and it was a very tough time in my life. Luckily, I barely made it through high school, and my high school senior year, because of that lady that you saw there, is the only person that I've ever feared. She's still alive, thank God, and she's still giving me a hard time. She's 5 feet tall, and it's my mother, right? And because of her, and I had an aunt that lived in Miami Beach, I was able to transfer in my senior year, and if not, I don't think I would have graduated from high school. The reason I'm giving you this background for all of you young folks out there is that you don't have to be perfect. On the contrary, you really have a chance to reset, right? And that's actually what happened to me. The reason why I was able to reset, and Armando said something which is very important to me, is because we're both graduates of Miami-Dade College. So I had, again, because of her, I went to Miami-Dade Junior College. And just to prove to her that I was never going to make it through high school, I barely made it through high school, I was not going to make it through college. And something wonderful happened. I just totally turned my life around. I discovered education. I discovered a nurturing environment, equal to none. Professors that cared. The president at the time of the North Campus, and it was just an unbelievable, I had never experienced. I had such a tumultuous time and rebellious time that it was like landing in paradise. And that totally changed my life. I began learning and liking it, and all of a sudden said, wow, I can really do this. And it was a turning point in my life. As I said there in the video, I decided to become a CPA by convenience, not by devotion. I'm not a devoted accountant, but I always do say that they're still the best 2 decisions I ever made. One's to become a CPA and the other one's not to practice, right? So and I always say, and by the way, this is not for you guys thinking about an accounting degree and practicing, there's just nothing wrong with that. On the contrary, it's just for me, it was a means to an end. It was credibility. I was very early, kind of some of your age, and I said, what do I want to do? By that time, I loved education, and I was going to go to law school. I didn't want to be a lawyer either. So CPA was a shortcut to credibility. I'm more of a people person. I like sales, I like marketing, but I didn't see myself carrying a suitcase selling Xerox machines and Barrows computers at the time, right? So the CPA was a shortcut. And as I always say today, all these years later, I've only had 1 job in my life. 3 years with Pricewaterhouse. Since then, I've never worked a day. Everything has been pretty much quite an adventure. So along the way, as you saw there, my business took a turn. I quit, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today. And I took a turn, and I quit Price, and I ended up being in the real estate business, and developed some of the most iconic projects in South Florida, certainly in Miami-Dade County. Projects like Monty, Terramark Center, Coco Walk. I mean, there's just an endless number of projects that we developed at the time, and very, very successfully, right? Along the way, I founded a bank, a commercial bank, which we sold in 2007 to Sabadell Bank for almost $600 million from zero. And of course, the highlight of my career was in April 2011, when the CFO of Verizon initiated a wire transfer for $2,842,000, right? And I had to be co-signed by the CEO because of the amount. $600 million went to pay off debt, and $1.4 billion went to the shareholders, of which I was fortunate enough to be one of them. The reason I tell you these things is because this is the foundation of what I'm going to talk about. Because I spent a lot of time thinking about how this happens. How does this happen, right? And basically, how does it actually translate into, okay, I'm successful. One of the things that I want to encourage, particularly the young folks here today, is to please ask any questions. You're going to have, hopefully what I will do as I go through my remarks is arise certain things that you've already been thinking about, and I'll give you 100% promise that I will be 100% honest. You might not like the answer, but a lot of the answers are not what people are looking for. For example, some of the questions that I always get, how do you compromise between personal life and business, and just stuff like that that you may want to think about. But anyways, so I want this not to be a lecture. I want this to be a conversation, particularly geared to the young folks, where you can say, okay, you have an opportunity to ask, right? So how does this happen? So I begin thinking, are entrepreneurs born, right? What part does luck play into all this? And can you train to be an entrepreneur, right? These are really questions that I've pondered ad nauseum to my own self, because basically if I can translate it, right, and you can follow it, then obviously you'll be able to do a lot of good in the world. So as I've thought about these questions, I've come to the conclusion in my life that you can in fact train to be an entrepreneur, right? As a matter of fact, entrepreneurs are the dumbest people in the world. They believe they can do something that everybody else is telling them they cannot do, right? So how stupid do you have to be an entrepreneur, right? So now, think about that scenario. I love to play tennis. I could never in a million years become a professional tennis player. I can't do it. But anybody can be an entrepreneur. Those has no difference. Age, education, all you need to have is certain principles. You can go out at any time of your life. Cash in, not cash in, retire, not retire, you can become an entrepreneur. Now, an entrepreneur is not just about money. Entrepreneurship is about creating a dream that you fulfill. It could be writing a book, it could be whatever, right? It could be becoming a famous chef. It really doesn't have to be, that's my definition of entrepreneur. It's not about the translation of money. So can you actually become an entrepreneur? Yes, I believe you can condition yourself, and there are certain principles that I've practiced and that have been the most helpful in my life to become an entrepreneur. What part does luck play? Well, definitely plays a part, right? Luck plays a part. But you know what I've learned? The harder I work, the luckier I get. I know it sounds silly, everybody talks about it, right? But it's true. I love to talk about luck in an example that I tell about these two workers in a factory that the local racetrack was having a contest, on the radio contest. And they each got a $5,000 stipend to bet on a race at the racetrack. So they both got the same amount. Neither one of them knew anything about horse racing. So here's what they did. The first guy says, I gotta learn everything that I need to know about horse racing. So he began immediately. He began learning the genealogy of all. They knew exactly the day of the horse they were gonna run. They began learning about the jockeys, about the weather, what kind of soil conditions makes this horse run faster or not. They began learning about betting methodologies. He began learning about betting methodologies. I had never bet on a horse race before. What is the best way for me to insure? So he began, and he did all this research, right? And worked very hard before the day of the race. The other guy did nothing. He just said, man, I'm in for the big times. I'm now rich. As a matter of fact, he maxed out his credit cards because he would just go out and take his friends out drinking and kept drinking beer and pay for their drinks because he was going to be rich, right? So here comes the day of the race. And of course, the guy who had done all the research and was prepared bet. And you know, his $5,000 turned into around $8,000. Not a very bad return, right? The guy who had done nothing gets stopped that morning. And of course, he was not prepared. And then all of a sudden, he gets up. And he typically used to get up at 6, but that day he got up at 5 because he was going to the racetrack. So 5, and then he looks at the calendar, and it's May 5th. 5-5. So he goes downstairs, and there's 5 place settings in his breakfast table when they typically have, there were 4 because he forgot that his son had a guest in the house. So 5. So since he's taking a different bus route that day to the racetrack, it's route number 55. So all this 5, 5, 5, and he gets there, and he goes to the 5th gate, and as he's walking in, he says, this is a signal. I got it. I got to bet it all on number 5. So he goes there, he puts the entire $5,000 on number 5. You know what happened? He came in 5th place. Right? So this is all about luck. The lucky that you get is because the harder that you work, and it's as 100% in my life. So when it comes then to entrepreneurship, I'll start with a little disappointment. There are no secrets. Isn't that sad? I always tell people this because everybody is always, what is the secret of success? There's no secrets. I love the weight loss industry. I'm going to write a weight loss book. There's billions of dollars spent on weight loss industry every year. What is the secret to losing weight? Eat less, exercise more. That's going to be my weight loss, right? Book, and I'm going to charge $9.99, right? And that's it. One sentence. The same thing in entrepreneurship. There are no secrets, but there are certain principles that I've kind of lived through my life that actually help, right? And the number one, and really the others are not in sense of order, they're all important, but the number one principle, it is the most difficult principle for you to adhere to, and that is having a positive attitude. It is extremely difficult for you to have a positive attitude all the time. As a matter of fact, it's almost impossible. You have to train to have a positive attitude. You have to be, the one thing that I will guarantee everybody in this room is that bad stuff is going to happen. There's no question about that. As a matter of fact, bad stuff needs to happen. Without bad stuff, you can't have good stuff. It's the yin and the yang of life, right? The most extreme, horrendous things need to happen in order for the most wonderful things to happen, right? And this is something that is very difficult to learn. It took me many, many, many years for me to be able to absorb this. And this is something that you really need to understand, and you will see. It is no, you cannot have is the positive and the negative, right? You can never know what quenching thirst is if you're not thirsty, right? And this is the exact same thing. Bad things are going to happen to you. The difference is, what do you do about it, right? What do you do when your girlfriend cheats on you, when your boyfriend leaves you, when when you all of a sudden get your identity stolen, when you get a speeding ticket, when you get a health problem? What do you do at that moment? Now, I'm not suggesting that if you get a speeding ticket, you go out and throw a party, but you don't have to become a drama queen or king. There are people in your lives, I guarantee you, if each one of you will think of one right now, that are always have a major problem. I have a dear friend, I love her to death, but every time I sometimes, oh, she's calling. There's always a drama in her life, right? And she's a great person, and I'm sure all of you have the same. What happens? Who do you try to gravitate to? Who do you want to gravitate to? The people who have a positive attitude. You don't want to continue to listen to somebody else's gripes when you have so many of your own, right? So therefore, that's what happens. You begin all of this by creating your brand. All you young kids, think about yourselves as, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be selling yourselves your entire life, right? Literally, you're going to be selling yourself. So you have to start by creating a brand. Why do you buy Mercedes versus Lexus? Because you trust the brand, right? Price and everything else is important, but it's all about trust. And that trust is the most important thing that you need to do as young folks, starting now, starting when you leave here. And the first and most important part is that positive attitude. Think about how you're going to be positive. You know what happens? People gravitate to you. Deals are brought to you. People give you things when other people don't get it because they want to be with you because you're a positive person. Now, sometimes you have to force it, and but it's very difficult. It's very difficult for you to get up in the morning to say, I'm going to be positive, positive, positive. What is the most important factor? We're living in very exciting times. It's really funny because I cannot have enough lifetimes to accomplish everything. I mean, as exciting as the internet revolution was, what is happening today is much bigger, as I explained in the video. It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. It's an opportunity where anything is possible. The speed of change, I believe, in 1976, Philadelphia had its first World Fair, right? It was as much a celebration of 100 years of our young nation as it was a celebration of the technology at the turn of the century. That was not known. At that time, we had no way of dispersing the news except by newspapers that would arrive weeks later. So the fair in Philadelphia, the wonder of the fair in Philadelphia in 1876 was this cordless steam machine that powered the entire fair, where 10 million people came from all over the world, and it was managed and handled by one person. This was a wondrous invention that had never been seen before. The point that I make by this is that imagine all that farm boy that took 5 days in a horseback ride to come from Kansas City to Philadelphia, and now all of a sudden goes in there and sees this wonder, right, of technology. What happened after the World Fair? It was the Industrial Revolution, right? It was the automobile, electricity, airplanes, you name it. It was 50 years of the most incredible wealth creation and wealth disruption that the world had ever seen, right, at the time. It was either adapt or die. You either adapt or die. You today cannot do business without adapting to the new reality. If you're a bank, you're going to read about yourself if you don't protect yourself, right? On the pages. If you are any business, unless you utilize real data, your competitor is going to eat your lunch. So these are very exciting times, right? Where the amount of wealth creation and wealth destruction and disruption is on parallel only equal to the Industrial Revolution. I am definitely convinced of that. So you guys have a lot to be looking forward to. So it helps you in your positive attitude as you think through all this exciting times that you're able to live in today. I have a great, I'm a great admirer of an individual called Dr. Peter Diamandis. I highly recommend to all of you to read his book, Abundance. Dr. Diamandis was a Harvard MD. He's a futurist, a thought leader. He's the one that created SpaceX, and the guy is just unbelievable. I had the privilege to have him speak last year at our inaugural Emerge Americas. And the book Abundance, the reason I recommend it so high is because his whole principle is about how technology solves everything. It's just that the technology is not there in time today. And if you think about our lives, some of us who are older than the younger folks here, the world is always ending, right? I mean, I remember in my college years having to push my car because we were going to run out of oil. And the Middle Eastern countries were going to own us. And and petroleum, and the world was going to end. I remember when I began getting education, learning about how the world was going to starve because we could never handle this population, right? That the explosion of population. If you remember, Dr. Fisher at Berkeley was one of the advanced writers of of how we were going to all starve to death, and because we could not cope with this. Today it's no different. Now, what happened to energy? Self-independent. Technology wasn't there. Now it is, right? Look at technology when it comes to farming and planting. You need a fraction of the amount of soil that you needed before to produce this 100 times the amount of food. Why? Because the technology is there. And he goes on through many of these examples, which are fascinating. Energy even further. We get about 16 terabytes of power from the sun every day. 5,000 times the amount of power that we consume as mankind. What is happening today? Solar technology is not there yet, but it's going to be. Pretty soon, you're going to have a photo cell. Now they're more efficient. That is going to make the power issue go away. So basically, it's very exciting times. So why be so negative, right? That positive attitude comes at a time where all of this, and one of the most amazing examples that he does in the book is he talks about how an old Emperor Tiberius in Rome, who was a very cruel emperor, one time one of his subjects came in and he had discovered this metal that was so fragile and beautiful and light and silvery and shiny, and he showed it to the emperor, and the emperor quickly realized that, of course, all his fortunes were in gold, and he asked the guy, who knows about this? The guy says, no, it's only me, the forger, and God. Nobody else knows about how I did this. So he quickly cut his head off because he understood that his own gold reserves were at risk because of this beautiful metal, right? So the secret went away until the Napoleon years. And Napoleon, actually, this metal was so precious that he had a banquet where the Sultan of Siam came, and the super guests were served in this beautiful, beautiful light metal in these plates, and the ordinary folks were served in gold plates during this banquet. That's how precious this metal was. What was the metal? Aluminum, right? Today you throw it up, you use it to wrap, right? This is the most expensive thing. Why? 7% of the earth is bauxite. that makes aluminum. The technology wasn't there yet, right? And if you think about that, I believe strongly in this. There's no way, whether it was antibiotic, influenza, whatever, where the technology doesn't result. So these are very exciting times for you young folks, for you not to be getting negative. And by the way, think about it. It's funny, why are we all so negative, right? Think about child mortality, maternal mortality. Poverty levels have skyrocketed. We're freer today than we've ever been. Think about Russia and China. There's very, very few dictatorships left. We're killing each other at rates that have plummeted. It's kind of interesting as I read this new ISIS issues, and we're talking about sending 475 troops. In one battle, in World War I, we will kill 300,000 people. One battle, right? 40 million, 50 million people killed. So everything is substantially better than it was, everything. So why are we so negative? So one of the things that he talks about it is we're engineered with a cell in our brain which is called the amygdala. It's about the size of a walnut, and it's in that cell. And that cell is better known as the flee or fight cell, right? And we were, in order to do that, as we have evolved through millions of years, it was a cell that protected our lives. Because during the primal times, if you think about it, and if you heard a rustling on the leaves, and if it was a tiger in the bush, unless you flee, right, your DNA was not going to be passed to your next generation, right? So therefore, it was that cell. The amygdala is a cell of flee or fight, right? Run or fight. And that cell was always there to keep us. What happened was, in today's world, that cell is never quieted. We're always on alert. Think about 24/7 news junkies. Think about everything. If it bleeds, it leads. It's true. But do we really need to know? Do we really need to know that somebody in Butte, Montana killed two, So what happens is we're always on alert. ISIS may attack. Terrorists may attack. The economy may go down. The dollar is going to plummet. So we're always on alert. We never quiet down. And that tends to be very much a factor as to why we are so negative. And I believe that we're engineered that way. So when you, by acknowledging this and knowing this, then you can work on it. You can turn yourself off, as I'll talk about a little bit more in my comments when it talks about another one of my principles. So again, number one is being positive. And I think this will serve you well as you go through your life. Another one of my principles is keep your word. And I know that sounds easy, keep your word, but it's also very difficult. What I mean also is about the brand, right? Become trustworthy. Know that when you say something, it means it. Be on time. Stupid things like being on time. I am anal about being on time, even today. I don't care if it's to an employee, I don't care if it's to whatever. Why? Because you become reliable. You're trusted. When Joe Piñera gives his word on something, people know that it means something, right? So keeping your word is very, very important. You become reliable, the same thing happens. You have a positive attitude, you're now reliable, things become coming more and more your way, right? And it's very important, and keeping your word sometimes is very expensive. Because you giving your word, you regret it, and then you want to go back, right? And I tell you something, it'll come back and haunt you, and it'll come back and pay off in many, many, many ways. One of the greatest stories that I say about keeping my word, and Joe will definitely relate to this, in my development years, I was doing a lot of development in Coconut Grove, right? And Coconut Grove, for those of you who are not familiar with Coconut Grove, is a very militant, activist neighborhood, right? Where developers are hated. And at that point, I was doing a lot in Coconut Grove. We had developed a lot. We bought a lot of property, like monkeys, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And I was building an office building. And God works in very mysterious ways, by the way, because I also don't like cats. I'm a dog person, right? I don't like cats. So therefore, we had accomplished, these are times when we had already had a loan in place, building permit, closed the loan, got my demolition permit, we were demolishing, we were going to build the most ambitious project that I had ever built before. A almost 300,000 square foot office building, right? So I'm getting to demolish. At that point, I was in a big battle with the neighborhood because we're looking for rezoning parts of the property. And oh my God, I was the devil incarnate. There's a parade that they do every year to tell you how bad this is. There's a parade that is called the Mango Strut Parade, which is a spoof of the Orange Bowl Parade, right? So my wife and I and my 2 kids at the time, little, young, were on the corner right there, and here comes a Mango Struck Parade, and they had a coffin, and they were doing a mock New Orleans kind of funeral, and the name of my coffin, the coffin was mine, right? That's how much they hated me. They hated me with a passion, right? And I was going there, kind of, having my Sunday teas with these ladies that hated me with the guts. So here's what happens. So I get a reporter calling me, and Terry, my assistant who's been with me forever, she says she wants to know about the cats. And I said, what? The cats? And I'm about to demolish this building. Bulldozers are there, everything, my life is on the line. And I said, and I got it. I said, you know what? I know what she's talking about. So I returned her call, and she says, Mr. Medina, yes, this was not a good attitude. What are you doing about the cats? I said, well, we're going to rescue them all. There happened to be a colony of cats under the building that I was going to send to a better place, right? But basically, I realized that, that this is what she was talking about. And one thing very unique about Coconut Grove, the per capita of cats for people is 10 to 1. For every person, they own 10 cats. They love cats. You go to any house on a Sunday, they have 42 cats. So I said to her, well, I'm going to rescue them, and we already have it, etc. And she said, and as a matter of fact, the only problem is that we've been looking for somebody who, etc. Do you have any suggestions? She says, yes, I know somebody who's slightly meant for cats. Make a long story short, I ended up halting the project for a whole month. Imagine how much this cats cost. We had another project right next to us, there, a project called Grove Hill, on Terra, where it was already empty. So we took 3 apartments, filled it up with cats. I had to neuter every male, spay every female. I had a kitten adoption program that started, and I had given her my word that I was going to do that. And she said, okay, I'll take you on your word. That word was very expensive. I've got to tell you, every cat there. But here's what happened. It began turning around. She actually talked to the editorial board, and we got an endorsement from the editorial board in the zoning that meant an unbelievable difference to us in time versus litigating, versus going all this stuff and delaying my project a lot more. We actually got her favorably on our side. A direct result of keeping my word, particularly against something that I wasn't particularly too fun with, right? So I've got many, many examples of this, of keeping your word, and how it comes back to help you. Another one of my real important factors, and I know it sounds silly, but I've just really thought about things that have helped me, and it's keep informed. Here's what happens. Please don't misinterpret this by arrogance, because I am not. I'm just really trying to do things to help you guys, right? So if you keep informed, you become an interesting person. You become an interesting person that you can talk about stuff, not just what you want to talk about, what other people want to talk about. Because you typically become a good listener, and you see that people want to talk to you about something else that you think they just want to hear about whatever you're interested in. And then if you become a balanced person, you become informed, you become an interesting person. Go back to the brand. You have a positive attitude, people trust you, and you're fun to be with. You're fun to have a beer with. You want to have a conversation with somebody, right? I am an insatiable reader. I will read the back of the cereal box 10 times, the same cereal box, right? And I will consume anything around me of every topic. I will learn about anything. I don't care what it is. And it's very, very balancing and very, very important to you. If you go out with business people, all they want to talk to you is about the market and interest rates and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you go out, with art people, and all they want to talk to you is the latest, blah, blah, blah. And you talk to them about so forth and so on. And I think if you become an informed person, a balanced person, you become a more interesting person. This has helped me a lot throughout, particularly my international career, where I went out and, for example, in every country that I either spent a lot of time with, I learned part of the language. Some of it I would learn fluently, like French, others like Arabic, right? Where I would go in and Robin is smiling because we had our adventures there. So Arabic, because it was just fun, right? If I go in and you become informed. So if you become an informed person, I think that a lot of people will like you more than if you're not. I had the honor of giving the commencement address of the School of Engineering at the University of Miami a few years ago. And I get up there and I had the regalia on, I walk up with the dean, and of course he introduces me, and I'm supposed to motivate these few hundred, mostly guys, girls, engineering kids that are about to graduate. And I started up there and I said, honor to be here, blah, blah, blah. But I gotta tell you something. You guys and girls already made a mistake. You decided to become engineers, right? So I can't help you with that. That mistake you already made. So look at me and says, wait a minute, this guy's supposed to be inspiring me. Anyway, so it's funny because even to today, I'll run into some of them that remember. But I told them the whole address was, get out of that box. If you engineers think they owe and know everything, right? If you don't get out of that box, you're doing yourself a tremendous disservice. Take a liberal arts class. Go out and learn about the world. Engineering, yes, is critically important, but everything else. So I think keeping informed is a very, very important part of building that brand of yours very early on. The other one that I think is very important is keeping a sense of humor. Have to learn to laugh at yourself. I have never met anybody who is powerful, really powerful, that does not laugh at himself or herself. It shows self-confidence. To have that self-deprecating humor where people say, this guy is confident. He doesn't care because he's confident. And I tell you, some of the most successful people do this, right? And keeping a sense of humor is critically important because you bring in levity into tense situations. Joe, as we were driving up, he said, me and Evan, I don't know where Evan is, we could have a little chit chat. You got to be able to learn to laugh at yourself. Now, there's a big difference. Don't become a clown, because and that's a fine line there, because you also don't want to be with a clown, right? That everything is a joke in life, because everything is not a joke. But having that sense of humor has helped me tremendously as I've grown. One of the best examples that I use about my sense of humor and how that has helped me is during Termark, we built a very, very big, ambitious project in a town called Culpeper, Virginia. Culpeper is around 60 miles west of the capital, Washington, D.C. But Culpeper is a lot closer to West Virginia and the culture of West Virginia than it is to D.C. It's a real country town. I mean, to give you an idea, we bought an old vineyard, 30 acres vineyard that had been closed for a number of years. I still have 2 of the bottles of wine. If I ever want to poison myself, I'll take one. The vineyard was there, and we were going to build this major data center project, right? And then, of course, the Culpeper Gazette, you can actually Google all this, the Culpeper Gazette was writing all these articles and editorials, and here comes this guy, Manuel Medina from Miami, these Cubans are now invading us, that kind of these guys that, to give you an idea how deep ingrained this culture was, when we transferred the property, the deed had been in the family since the 1700s. It had been deeded by the king to that family. That's how deep those roots run there, right? So the thing that all of a sudden I'm there, they're petrified. So at the time, the mayor of Culpeper, who I got to know, and at the time there was a Democratic governor of Virginia, who was a phenomenal guy, came, and so we said, okay, it's a coming out party. So I go out there, and we did it at the auditorium of the junior college in Culpeper. We probably held 500 people. It was so they had to put speakers outside because people came from 50 miles around, right? And there were, I don't know, a few thousand people around there. And they're meeting this foreigner from Miami that was going to come here. And I'm standing there, and I go up, and the mayor, the governor, and then they introduce me, and I get up on the podium, and I begin saying, thank you, it's a great honor, I can't believe that I'm privileged enough to be here in Culpeper, and then I stop. And I said, Mayor, I'm hardly here 5 minutes, and I'm already terribly disappointed. I asked you, please, I wanted a microphone without an accent. That's exactly what happened. Everybody cracked up. And everybody said, you know what? I could have run for mayor of Culpeper. My boots and my hat, and go out and have a beer with them. And sense of humor, laughing at yourself, totally broke that barrier, right? And basically, it's something that is critically important as you move through your life, right? Moving right along, because I don't want to abuse, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions. Another one that is critically important is keep humble. Life has a way, when you really think you know your shit, to take a 2x4 and hitting you in the back of the head and saying, you're not so smart after all, right? The reason why I ended up in Kuwait, and that's where I met Robin and husband, was because in the late 80s, I was on it. You saw the article, Cuban, blah, 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 Monty's, Joe knows about this. I was really on it. My family, we lived on Star Island. I had my yacht behind me. I was flying my plane, all this stuff, my life. And it was just like, wow, you know, I'm really, man, I really know that. You forget about that. I know my stuff, right? Well, let me tell you something. In a matter of time, from everywhere, I had built a project where the main tenant of that project went bankrupt. And all the executives of that company called General Development, were indicted. And all of a sudden, my name had nothing to do. I was only a landlord of it, but they were a limited partner and they were the main tenant of the building. All of a sudden, that through a whole chain of events, right, that as a leveraged developer, right, actually was almost uncontrollable. At the same time, you had the entire fiasco of the RTC and the fiasco of the savings and loans, and everything was happening. And I went from being on top of the world to being in the middle of those fires, in the middle of an incredible hostile situation, where all of a sudden I had never experienced solitude. I had never experienced what we experienced there. It will be a beautiful day, and then all of a sudden it will be black. We were working, Robin's ex-husband and I, we were working 16, 17 hours days, right? 7 days a week. All of a sudden, I went from here to a place where, you know, you had to smuggle a beer, and then it was non-alcoholic, right? I mean, where I had to have my broccoli boiled and not steamed. So anyway, so it's a private joke. So anyway, so what happens is I went from the summit to a place that I could never have fathomed in a very short period of time. Now, at the time, why did I do that? Well, it was my choice. I was marred in the middle of all this litigation. My bankruptcy forms were filled. Luckily, twice in my life, I've almost been bankrupt, right? Every time that this has happened, it's always been for the better. The best thing that ever happened to me was those years in Kuwait. That time, and then in Saudi Arabia, was an unbelievable time for me, because I was able to find myself, and I was able to understand that, but for the grace of God, is where you are, right? And you begin to understand that humility is very important to you. I don't care, you're a hotshot athlete, you're a hotshot whatever, humility is going to serve you extremely well. The last example, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of, the last point that I'll cover is, and again, this is all no secret, right? The last point that I'll cover is the oldest one in the book. Keep trying. Now that sounds simple, right? Keep trying. Now, how bad do you want it? It's one of the questions that people ask me about. How bad do you really want it? Do you have that burning sensation, you know, that you really have to do this? Do you have to, as I used to like to say, you have to sleep fast because you can't wait to get up in the morning? You have to get this done. You have that burning sensation. Do you totally believe in what you're doing, notwithstanding what people are telling you? Do you need to get this done, right? This is the number one driver, and only you can answer that. But if all of those things are true, what is really very, very difficult about keep trying is that you don't know how long it's going to take. Imagine a tremendously long ladder that you can never see the end, and you do not know if success is in the next step or 5,000 steps later, right? So it's that keeping trying, that fortitude of saying, I'm not going to give up, I'm not going to give up, I'm not going to give up, I'm not going to give up. And people hate rejection. We all hate rejection. That's why, you know, selling is so difficult, because you don't like to be told no, right? And so you're rejected. The people are telling you your idea is not going to work. You're not going to get your funding. You're not going to get your financing. Whatever. You're not going to be able to publish your book. Whatever. But you know they're wrong. How? I don't know, but you know it. And now there's this fine line between delusion and perseverance, right? But anyways, but you know you're right, and you come and continue persevering. And I can tell you, countless of my friends, we've talked about these principles one-on-one, and they all say the same thing. You don't know what that next door, what it's going to hold behind you. The greatest example that I have of perseverance and paying off is the NAP of the Americas. The Network Access Point of the Americas is one of the most ambitious projects that I have undertaken at the time. It is the main interconnection point between Latin America, North America, and Europe. To give you an idea, 95% of the traffic between all three continents goes to the Napa of the Americas today. There's 180 carriers in there. When we started developing that project, like most projects, we're a publicly traded company already that the year before, and like most projects, you don't have all the funding in place, right? Because you go in, you do it by pieces because you don't want to do it, you want to do it at the optimal price. That's why that was a very good lesson also that I teach all the young entrepreneurs that aspire with young companies is take the money while it's there. But anyways, at that time, we didn't have all the funding done. There was, I don't know, maybe about $150, $200 million project. And as we were going along, we had all the pre-commitments from the carriers. Everything was in place. It was a prudent business plan. And it wasn't like we were crazy, right? It was all done. There was a consortium of 150 plus companies, including all the major carriers of the world, that created a request for proposal, and we won against the big competition, including people like Lockheed. And what did we win? The right to build the network access point in America. So we were pretty secure, meaning all the carriers were already there. With the carriers, we had a whole business plan that we later on implemented. So what happened? Several things. The telecommunications industry imploded. The internet bubble burst. And we put the project in, completed it in August of 2001, 30 days before September 11th, when Wall Street was out to lunch, right? So all of a sudden, there was no financing anywhere. Here I was, in the middle of a crisis. I thought that I was only going to experience this once when I went to Kuwait and almost went back. Well, here I was again, right? Here I was again, at the verge of really going down. I had all these people that wanted to rescue me, but rescue me means, you know, diluting myself to the point where I become the ballet parker, you know, so it wasn't worth it. So what happened was, I was so convinced about what we were doing. Now, we were trying to explain things that people didn't understand. Nobody lived with their PDAs, and nobody knew the internet was just beginning to become really important now. We'd go out and, you know, and so my CFO and I, great guy, and at that point, at that time, you didn't have little digital stuff like this. I would carry a projector that weighed like 30 pounds, and my laptop weighed like 20, you know, and him and I were going, we will pitch anybody. We would get an appointment in New York. We'd get on a plane on super economy class, and you know, we'd pitch the cab driver from LaGuardia to the city. You know, whatever, I would just go and pitch it. One of the funniest stories that I have in this is actually sad. It's funny now, it wasn't at the time. We had gotten an appointment with a banker in New York, a banking institution that doesn't exist anymore. But anyways, so nevertheless, my CFO and I we were there, we prepared ourselves, we got everything ready. I gave this passionate, you know, pitch on what the Napa of the Americas was going to be, and how all these carriers are going to be here, we're going to carry all this traffic, and this is what it's all going to be, blah, 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 blah. And the guy's sitting there, and I give him this pitch, and at the end of the conversation, I said, guy doesn't say a word. I said, do you have any questions, comments, anything else I can clarify for you? This is a true story. My CFO will vouch for it. He goes into his pocket and gives me an envelope. It was his resume. The guy says, I hear things are better in Miami than here. So I said to my CFO, it's time for plan B or C, right? But here's the deal. We didn't quit. We just knew it. We knew that this was going to be so valuable and that it was unbelievable. And I kept pitching everybody. Luckily, I'd made money for a lot of people before in my previous life. And I was just relentless. But we were almost at the end. So I live in a place called Fisher Island, which at the time, probably the only person that was really near the brink of bankruptcy was me, because most people that live there are very affluent. And I was on a Saturday playing tennis, and right after tennis I went to the bar, and I have a beer. I'm sitting on the bar, right next to me. There's this guy. Now you're already qualifying to leave because you know anybody who's there, no destitute, right? So I'm sitting there, and the guy introduces. I introduce myself to the guy, and we begin talking. What do you do? I'm in the securities business. What do I do? Technology, blah, blah, blah. I tell him about the Napa of the Americas. And we're talking. This is Saturday afternoon around 11:30, quarter to 12, something like that. And he begins interested, and he was asking some really good questions, and that's his business, and you know, he funds public companies, that blah, blah, blah. And he says to me, so where is this NAP thing? And I said, right here in downtown Miami. He says, can we see it? And I said, sure, we can see it. So I'm rushing back. I said, let me just go change shirts. I'm rushing back, you know, just wait for me 5 minutes. I get on the phone, I'm calling everybody this Saturday. Hey, we got a live one. So just go. So they're going and they're rushing off, and you know, that's it. I'm the most loyal people in the world, right? And because so anyways, we get to the NAP, when giving him the tour, and that was very, very impressive. Right, he really imagined thinking it's like a Disney World kind of tour. And I'm giving him this tour, and again, very passionate, this is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And the guy says to me, it's okay, I've seen enough. And I said, oh shit, here we go again. And he says, so how much money is it that you're looking for? And I said, well, really to get fully funded, you know, just get this out behind us, we need about $90 million to pay off the bank loan at the time, which was already in default, and we had all this other stuff, and that's what I need. And I was very honest with him. And the guy says, okay, you got it. I'm thinking, maybe a con. The next thing he's going to ask me for a fee. That was, you know, I was already alert. Oh, you give me $200,000 and I said, okay. I said, but listen, let me tell you something. We have a lot of competition now because now that we got some material, we got a lot of people coming. We got a deadline. To prove that you're serious, you really need to just give us some money up front. You know, which, you know, obviously will be blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't secure because everything was indebted. And he says, okay, how much? I said, how about 10 million? And I said, he said, okay. I swear, this is an incredible story. And he says, okay, by Wednesday, I had the first 10 million in the bank. 3 weeks later, we had $90 million in the bank, paid everybody off, and the rest is history. It was about perseverance. It's about not giving up. And this is not the only story in my life like this. Things that you don't know where they're going to come from. You don't know the next door that you're going to open, right? And that's really very, very important. If you take all this in context, and if you put it back together about building your brand, right? It'll pay off in very, very, very big ways for all of you. And I'm humbled by your patience, and thank you very much.
I know you must be just full of questions, so I'll take the first one. First question.
Gotcha. I apologize. Mr. Medina, why was it that you left the Middle East?
Sorry?
Why did you leave the Middle East when you were on track to do well?
Why did I leave, or why did I go?
Why did you leave from there?
Oh, I couldn't wait to get back here. I mean, listen, you take things for granted, you know, like having a beer and, you know, going to a movie and, you know, just being with your friends and etc. No, I couldn't wait to get out. You know, just basically, it was a hard time for me to be there for all of us. I mean, to be there. And I just couldn't wait to get back here. So it was just enough time for me to be able to exit in a lucrative way for me.
You mentioned sometimes it's dangerous for us to be too alert and we know too much about people dying in Mississippi and all that stuff. So, but you also mentioned being informed. So what would you say the fine line is being?
Yeah, it's like everything, and it's a very good question. It's a very, you know, if you become a news junkie, and I think the fine line is these people that will come in, and it's all kind of related. What's your name?
Sam.
Sam. So it's kind of related, right? Because some people, you will see somebody, and the first thing they tell you is, did you see those 2 people that were killed in Mississippi? You know, so what I'm saying is, it's a fine line. You need to be informed, but I don't think that minutia of what really, you know, of what we see every day, it's really important to you. You need to understand trends. You need to understand where things are going, but not being consumed by the gory details of what's going on and getting in there to the point where it just consumes your life. And this happens to a lot of people. They cannot wait for the next event to happen, right? I mean, of that sort. So I think it's a fine line. And there's no, all of this stuff is gray. There's no black and white. So all I'm telling you is principles. And it's common sense. You'll know. You'll know if you want to learn about what is happening in the economy and why is the dollar strong and why is the euro weakening. If this is an area of interest to you, I think that's very important. Is it really important to know that a company in Spain laid off 100 people and that the 2 people that were laid off killed 30 people because he went mad? I don't think so, right? And that's, do you follow me? Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
What was your motivating factor from going, like, you know, doing nothing to saying, okay, I want to put together this project?
You mean doing nothing like now in my life? I've never done nothing. That's not, so I don't.
But there, I mean, at one point you were working, right? And then there was a shift somewhere.
No, it's a shift, continuous shift. But it's never been doing nothing. As a matter of fact, the only time I've ever done nothing, it was, and if you know me, I guess you can tell You know, I mean, I'm by nature kind of motivated, and, you know, etc. So, but when I sold the company and I left the company, I was, and I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but I was disciplined about taking time off. And I would take 6 months off, and I tell you, it was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. And it's like, where are my 300 emails? What do you mean I have nobody? Nobody wants to see me. You know, it's like that. So I never not done nothing. I think if your question is what motivates you to embark on this risk-taking on any type of project, sometimes it's need, sometimes it's just, you know, that you understand that there's a need to be filled, right? And you have this opportunity, and you believe in it, and you go forward. Is that what you're talking about? Or?
Could you expand a little bit more on that? That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so exactly, I mean, you must have an idea inside of you, right, already. And that idea is you're lurking. You have a job, do I quit it? You know, you have maybe a wife and a family, maybe you have a mother, maybe you have student loans, and you always have this idea that you're going to do this stuff, and then you're always working for the perfect moment. And no, maybe next week, and maybe I'll get it out, and then all of a sudden life passes. And then what happens is there's no, like I was telling Sam, this is all gray. It's no perfect moment. You're not going to have an epiphany that somebody says to you, like the guy on the fifth, with the fifth horse, right? You're never going to have an epiphany like that. What you're going to do is, you're going to say, okay, I've done the planning, I've prepared myself the most that I can, I've learned as much as I can, I've made my contingency plan, I know what my downside is, and I'm willing to live with it. If you get all this done, then the moment of absolute certainty only arrives once. I don't want to get there yet. Right? None of you want to get there yet. So you take the plan that you have, you take whatever you've given at that moment, and you be very methodical. I am very methodical. I'm insanely anal about preparation. I will, before any meeting, I will go research the person. I want to know what school they went to. I want to be able to have that keeping informed part, right? So the same thing with your idea. Just research the hell out of it. Get yourself prepared. Make a list, right? The list is pros and cons. What happens if I succeed? What happens if, what do I really need? And then you make the best decision that you can with the facts given to you. Make sense? I don't know who's taking more of it.
Right here. Yeah, sorry.
How do you manage the pressure of managing other people's capital?
I tell you what. That's a very good question, by the way. So you cannot grow without other people's capital. That basically, even the biggest of the biggest know that, right? So what I do is that I consider my capital as if it was other people's capital. There's nothing that I don't do where my capital, whether I had it or not, sometimes it's just a debt. Sometimes it's ahead of anybody else. And the pressure is, at the very beginning, as you're growing, etc., you got to take a lot of people's money that you don't want to take. And they become a pain. But it's a means to an end. At this stage, I will only do business with people that I want to do business with. I don't need the capital, so therefore, but I need the capital. But I need the capital of people that have a like mind. Something else that is also very important, by the way, and you have a fine line between being too euphoric about your project and then disclosure, right, is making sure that you're honest and put it weighted. Just don't talk about everything that's going to go right. Tell them what may go wrong. Even though it may not help you, it helps you in the long end because there's no surprises. Most people say that capital invested by other people with you, it's a pain. It really is not. What really is a pain is surprises. If you say to somebody, look, there's a 99.9% chance that this is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. If you say to him, look, I think it's going to happen, here's the pros, here's the cons, then you don't have that reaction, right? So I think, and at the end of the day, you also have to do something that is very important. You need to be able to separate yourself, right, and don't take it personal. And that's very difficult, particularly for me, because I take everything very personal. So you take it there's a business, they know the risk, you were fair with them, something didn't work out. At the end of the day, it's not like you're there, obviously you're going to be honest, you're going to keep your word, you're going to do all this other stuff, you're not going to steal any of the money, and at the end of the day, I think it eventually ends up not being a burden. As a matter of fact, I like it. At this stage of my life, we began investing in all these technology companies, which is quite risky. We don't think so, because our money went first, and then I went out and invited people. I said, here's the risk, here's the factors, and we just raised a significant amount of money to invest in this kind of business. So I don't mind it, I kind of like it, but you cannot be offended by it.
Question here.
Yes, please.
Yeah. How do you see China over the next 20 years?
China?
Yes.
I have the opportunity and the real incredible pleasure of spending quite a bit of time in China. As a matter of fact, I admire the Chinese, personally on a fit basis. By the way, that's another thing that I neglected to tell you. Another one of the things that helps you is to keep fit. But on a fit basis, I'm a martial artist, and and this is all Chinese, and I spend a lot of time in China kind of studying. Today I do more like in the inner self and stuff like that. So I admire the Chinese. I admire the Chinese because the Chinese will do whatever needs to be done to get to their objective. Not that my principles are the same. So I believe China is going to be a significant world power. It already is. From an economic point of view, they have some serious problems. I would not invest in China today myself, even though we did have offices in Beijing, all the stuff, because China is just too unreliable. Whatever happens today, you see it today. If you read all the Western companies that are getting their tails kicked, is because of this unreliability, even today. So I think China is, it's not for me anyways. I don't consider China a threat or a danger. They got so many internal problems themselves. As they try to cope with this population and these new issues of rich versus poor and equality. You think we have inequality here? in China it's the same. So China is not a big deal for me anyways, from an investment point of view. Yeah.
Mr. Medina, thank you very much.
I want to make sure that the young kids have preference, right? If any of you guys... Right.
I had a question about parents or influences in your younger years, people who gave you the stuff to achieve what you achieved in life.
I was very lucky that way. And that's the part where luck really and truly plays a part. And I understand when life has not given you those hands, that you start out with more difficulty. I was very lucky because my mother and my father were great examples to me. My mother was just an unbelievable steward of, her perseverance, her positive attitude, and just doing what they did. My wife and I always wondered, would we ever have the fortitude to do with our two kids what they did with us, right? So I was very lucky that way. And so my mother, and also my grandfather. My grandfather was a politician. And it's part about keeping your word is something that he taught me from the time that I could hardly understand. So I was lucky that way. That's just a part of luck, right? What you were born into. Now that doesn't mean that if you were not born into those conditions, that then you use that as an excuse, right? Because there's a lot of other stuff that happened to us that couldn't happen, right? But that's it.
What were some of the goals that you set for yourself to get here?
The number one goal that I set for myself, and I know it sounds really, but I promise to be honest with all of you, at the very beginning, was to make money. I really wanted to make money. I was just tired of being poor. I was tired of everything that had to do with not having money, and my mother working. My mother, every day into today, and even during the bad times, I will always live. Today I was seeing in the paper how Mary is leaving envelopes for maids to give a tip to my entire life, because my mother would be so happy when she get home and get a $5 into my dad working 16 hours a day. So I just really, and I didn't like being poor, right? And I didn't like all this burden that he had on me. So my number one goal was sort of get to a point where it wasn't just a burden on us, because of the poverty that we had lived with, right? And so that was one of our goals. Now, as I grew, and luckily, once you feed yourself, and once you get to that, beyond that, then comes the next thing. What do I really want to do? Then it's what you like. I happen to like what I do. I'm not doing it because I want to do it. I like putting things together. I like the pressure and doing that, and that really depends on you. So the goals will grow, and you will morph as you grow. At the very beginning, my goals were very simple.
Mr. Medina, I'm a professor here. I've always made comments that our education system perhaps don't prepare our students properly for this journey of entrepreneurship. Would you have any suggestions for us teachers and for students of what the education should involve to get them in this way of life?
Education should involve more practice, more practical. Theory is important, it's funny because you spend all this time with these economic classes, etc., but just be more practical. Take a class and give them each. It could be real money, and people that donate it, and give each one of the students $500. Let them open an account. Let them trade the stock. Let them come up with a plan. Be more practical. Let them understand the reality of pitching the plan. We had of the Emerging Americas, by the way, and I encourage all of you to go next year. We had the inaugural event this year, next year is just going to be phenomenal. We had 115 startups, and for coming from all over the world pitching. One of the things we also do is we did a program with Nifty. Nifty is a program for high school kids, right? We had 3,000 high school kids come to the event for free. And the reason we did it is because we wanted them to experience it. And you should see these kids, just your age, pitching their business plans, right? And that same passion and, and answering questions from judges. That is all training, right? And that's, I think you as a business school anyways, should definitely and truly 100%, and by the way, this cuts across disciplines. You should really and truly spend as much time as possible getting on the practical side of a career.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Medina. Let's give him a round of applause. I'm sure that your principles resonated with all of us, and we're just so lucky to have you here. And so I will certainly take those words those wise words and use them in my life as well. So, Provost Rogers, would you like to join us, please? We have a plaque for you.
Thank you.
To commemorate this day, from the H. Wayne Huizinga School of Business and Entrepreneurship and all of an issue, we thank you for spending the time and sharing all of your great life with us. Thank you so much. And also, I just want you to know, Ralph, that I'm going to take a particular liberty right now and to declare this day at NSU Manuel D. Medina Day.
Don't retire my number yet. Thank you, and again, apologies for if you perceive it as lack of humility in telling you all this stuff. It's really meant only as sharing my life experiences, and hopefully you can take it on the positive note. Thank you.